Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. Today we're going to learn how to paint a poppy in acrylic. This is the poppy. There's a original photograph of the poppy on the card, which you can click on so that you can download and print it off. Otherwise, you can screenshot this poppy and copy it. I'm going to show you a couple of things. I'm going to show you how to do two-tone leaves using two different shades of paint on your paintbrush. And I'm also going to show you how to paint using just normal brushes and a blending technique. Okay. So to start with, I have my canvas paper. Now canvas paper comes in pads. You can buy it at any art shop. It's just like watercolour paper, but it's slightly thicker and it has a rougher texture to it. I have my canvas paper stuck down on to a board with some masking tape. I've got a little experimental patch up here, and I've got the original drawing here. I also have a palette. Now I've just used a old Polly Pocket here with a piece of card inside, and on my palette I've got cadmium red, I've got orange straight out of the tube. This is all acrylic. I've got alizarin crimson, I've got cadmium yellow, and I've mixed cadmium yellow and cadmium red to make a burnt orange. You'll always get a slightly burnt orange rather than a bright orange when mixing these two colours together. I've also got a pale yellow, some phthalo blue, and some black, and a little bit of green for the stem. Okay. I've also got a couple of brushes, a couple of round brushes, brushes that are size appropriate to your paper, and I've got a couple of detailed brushes. This is a 0, just to put on some fine lines later on. Okay, so we're just going to get on with it. So first of all, I just want to put down some of this burnt orange colour. So I'm going to take a fairly decent sized, the other thing I've got as well is I've got 2 pots of paint. I've got 1 pot for cleaning off my brushes, and I've got 1 pot for mixing paint. Now with acrylic, if your acrylics are new or newish, you'll find that you can just paint with them straight out of the tube. They don't actually need much water, and one of the main faults of acrylic painting is adding too much water to your paint. So you can see that this is really runny. This has come straight out of the tube, so I'm just going to use it as is. However, if it's an old tube and it's a little bit thick, then obviously add a little bit more water to it just to get it moving, but please just be careful with the amount of water that you're adding. Okay, so we're going to apply the orange tone. Now if you haven't got any orange mix in a tube, then please just buy it from the shop, from the art shop, or you can mix up some orange, but like I said, it will be slightly burnt in tone than it would be coming straight out of the tube. So I'm just applying the orange to the lighter areas of the flower head. So coming down here, across the front, and these are the areas that are picking up the light. Keep referring to your, I'm actually referring to my my painting here that I did a rough of earlier on this morning, but you can refer to the photograph that I've put on one of the cards. that you can download and print. Like I said, I'm just using this paint straight from the tube, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get down as much paint as possible, because if I put enough paint on, that means it gives me time to blend. And one of the many issues with acrylic is the lack of blending time, because it dries so quickly, and that's one of the reasons why people like it so much, because it dries so quickly, unlike oil paint, which dries very slowly and sometimes can take months to dry. So this is a very convenient paint to use, and you can also buy it very cheaply in places like the Works. And though the paint is what we call a student quality, it's still usable. You might find it's a little bit thin, and that sometimes you have to put several coats on in order to get the result that you want. So like I said, I'm just applying the acrylic paint to most of the flower, nice and quickly. Don't worry too much about making mistakes, because the beauty of acrylic is that you can paint things back out again, paint over things, mistakes that you've made, so you needn't worry. And also, please don't worry too much about getting things accurate. If you get a rough drawing out that looks pretty solid, then once you come to paint it, you shouldn't have any issues really. So there's most of the orange. You can see I've left the bits which are slightly dark. I'm just going to put a touch up there, like the centre of the flower, etc, etc. You don't really need. Now you can see that the paint is still wet, still not drying out. If it's drying out a bit on you, please don't be tempted to put water onto it. If you put water on, all it does is it lifts the paint off again. So if it's drying out, just apply a little bit more of that same orange colour. So now we're going to go in and we're going to use the cadmium red colour. Now there is a little bit of water in this one because I had this in an old film container, and this has been around for a few years, so I use these quite often. I mean, I know they're quite difficult to get hold of these days, but they are airtight. So if you have a tube that's broken open or is more than halfway finished, then you can squeeze the paint out into something like this and it will keep for a bit longer than normal. So here we go. I'm going to put the large, I'm using the same brush, not too much water again, and I'm just going to start to put in the darker red and take it right down behind. You don't have to cover up the centre of the flower, but take it into that flower centre a little bit, just so that when we come to paint the centre, it has something to hold on to. So here we go. We're just going to put the darker red in, and again, be very loose. Don't worry too much about where it's going. Just observe how it's sitting on your photograph and just blend using the damp orange paint underneath. You can see that's blending, and if you can move your brush up and down the petal in the direction that the petal is actually moving, so like here the petal's going downwards, so if you make downwards brush marks like that rather than across brush marks, you'll find you'll get a much more natural finish. And you can see that the paint is still wet underneath there and is allowing me to blend. And like I said, if it isn't, then just add a little bit more paint rather than water. Just add paint, And again, we can always add orange tone back in if we lose a bit. So I'm going back, I'm working in the direction that the petal is going in, so which is up and outwards, like so. Now we've got a bit of a curve there. So I'm just going to make sure that you've got plenty of paint on your brush. And this is the underside of this petal that I'm painting here, where the petal is folded over and is creating a shadow underneath. So that's why it's darker. And here we've got a very dark area. Now you can see that my brush is only just about thin enough to get under that area there. If it's causing you problems, then move down to a slightly smaller brush. I'm painting this petal here, but I'm also painting this petal here. So again, just make your marks in the direction. This petal is going out this way, so make your marks that way. Don't paint downwards or across. It's not natural to do that. Just take your brush and work in the direction of the petal, and again just blend into the orange that's underneath. And again, you can see it's drying out a bit there, so if I just take a little bit more orange and just put it back in, so I've got a bit more orange there, and then I can blend that into the red. I hope you could see that when I did that. Okay, again, this end here is probably drying out a bit, so I'll take a bit more orange and just now blend that down into that petal there. I'm using the paint thickly. Don't use the paint like watercolour. People find it very difficult to move between the two, and there's a very good reason for that, because when you paint watercolour you paint really thin, and when you paint acrylic you paint really thick. So try not to use the acrylic paint like watercolour. So again, I'm using the excess paint that's now left on my brush, and I'm just going to go up and paint this petal on the left hand side. So you can see now the paint again has dried out over there. You can see how quickly it dries. So I'm just going to add in a little bit more orange just to loosen it up a bit, and then again up and out like so. Okay, and then we come down here. We've still got quite a lot of dark red on this brush, so use it while it's there. Don't be tempted to wash it off, because if you wash it off it goes into the sink, into the water and into the sink, and it's wasted, and acrylic is not cheap. So just be economical and also think of the environment in that situation. So again, a little bit more dark red here, a little bit more dark red there, some here, a little bit along the front, some here, some here, and again underneath this petal there is a shadow being created. So you can see I've got the body of the poppy pretty much painted in now. I'll just put a little bit of orange there where I've missed a touch. Make sure you've brought your colour down to the centre of the flower. So now once that's blocked in, you can really start to either blend or to add some more lighter tones, and etc, etc. But for this I'm now going to use a little bit of I'm going to use a smaller brush. Okay, so make sure you put your brush in the water and wash it off before you start using another brush, because acrylic paint, if it dries on your brushes, will cause havoc, and also you'll end up having to throw them away because they'll go hard. Okay, so I'm moving on to a smaller brush now, and this will help me to blend a little bit more. So we're going to start at the back and we're going to apply more paint. So in here, we want to define those areas a bit more now. So in there, I'm just going to put a little bit. I want to exaggerate that curve in there. So I'm going to put a little bit more red. I'm also going to start adding a little bit of alizarin crimson, which is a darker red here. Okay, and I'm going to darken the areas that are behind the centre of the flower, the head, the centre, where all the stamen are and things like that. And also I'm just going to come in here and put a darker line behind this fold here in the petal, like so. So a bit more darkness down the bottom in here, along this line here where there's a highlight, and that's where a petal again is folding over, again coming up from the center like so. Again along this dark edge here down to the center, and just flick upwards again in the direction of the petal, and that will help enormously. In underneath this fold here we've got a dark edge which comes all the way down to there, and also here, so it's exaggerating the top of this petal here, but also giving you some shadow where this fold is creating a shadow on the petal underneath. So again, work in the direction that the petal is going in. Same on this side, underneath needs to be darker underneath this fold here. And along the top edge of this petal, and again work outwards a little bit on the top, so we can see that there's a difference between this petal and this petal. We're just going to put a dark edge and a little bit of shading coming over that petal there, and here. So the darker sections are really to help you see what's going on more clearly, so that you can see the form a bit more clearly. So again in here I'm just going to put some darker bits. This is the alizarin crimson again. If your alizarin crimson is not dark enough, then just add in a dot of blue or purple, or if you have a darker red, then put a darker red in there. Sometimes it can be a bit light, and there is a little bit of a fold just underneath there like that. Okay, at the same time, because we're working with this alizarin crimson and it's on our brush, I'm just going to put an undercoat on this central section here, and that's just to get rid of the white paint, and the stamen go spiky outwards. So from here, push your brush up and go outwards in a curve shape. Okay, so now what else have we got? Right, so this needs to be darker up here. So I'm just taking a little bit of the cadmium red colour, and I'm just going to darken up just underneath this fold here, like so. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put a little mark here, like that. And I'm going to come, now how much detail you put in is entirely up to you. Because I want to keep these tutorials reasonably short, for various reasons, I'd like to just finish this as quickly as possible. So I'm not going to paint it in a great deal of detail, but now you've got the fundamental method of laying the paint down and working with the highlights and the shadows. You can keep going until you're happy with the marks that are being created on your poppy. You spend as much time as you wish painting this in, but like I said, because I want to keep the tutorials as short as possible, I'm just going to paint this to a certain level, which is fairly abstract, but still works. You can still see what's happening. So now we've got our dark areas in and our orange areas in and our middle tone areas in, which are the cadmium reds. We're going to just mix a little. I've got some what they call pale yellow here, and you can create pale yellow if you haven't got it by using a little bit of cadmium yellow and just putting a bit of white into it. And I'm going to put in a touch of red into that. So a touch of the cadmium red, and that will give you a sort of pinky tone. So rather than adding white into your paint, which tends to deaden the paint, use a little bit of pale yellow mixed with your cadmium red to get a pink, and we're going to use that pink to create the highlights. So again, use a fine brush and just put in some of those highlights. So the paint underneath is now more or less dry, so you will find that these highlights are very easy to put on, but they won't blend with what's underneath, which is kind of what you want. If the paint is wet still, then you'll find that they will blend with what's underneath. So just be patient. If you want to, you can wait for this to dry off and then paint your highlights on, or you can paint your highlights on and actually blend them in to what's underneath, but by adding a little bit more of the colour that's underneath. You can see this part of the petal here bends over, so I'm going to use curved marks like this, just here, like that. Can you see? And then that will describe that curve. We've got a little highlight coming down there. We've got a highlight coming along here, like that. The temptation to add white is enormous, but as with watercolour, if you can avoid it, please do. But obviously, you know, if you're painting a swan or a cloud or whatever, there are going to be whites in there, but there are always a shade of white. So add a little bit of colour in to your whites to change them ever so slightly so that they're not the stark white. And the other problem with white is that if you use it to mix your colours, it does flatten them down a lot. So try and avoid white, and try and avoid black if you can at all times. However, use them if you have to. So I'm still applying these highlights. I'm just going to go in up the top here and put one coming down here like that. I'm going to come, so you can see that my first poppy has a little bit more yellow in it than this one. So you can vary the colours that you apply to your poppy a little, but please observe what's going on in your photograph. It will help you enormously to keep referring to how the petals are formed, how they fall on the flower head, etc., etc. So I am going to put a touch of yellow, so I'm going to use this cadmium yellow here, and you can see it started to dry out on me. One way of stopping it from drying out on your palette is to use a little spray bottle, and every now and again just apply a slight spray over the top of your palette and your paint, and that will just give it the moisture that it needs to stop it from drying off, because obviously while you're painting, all of this is drying off on you. I also use a Stay Wet palette, and I'll put a link to one of those at the end of the tutorial. You can make them at home or you can buy them. They're literally just a plastic box with a lid and a damp paper towel in it, and if you put your palette in that, then that will remain wet for a few days at least. So a little bit of yellow, and we're just going to highlight up here a little, just the odd fleck, and you can see that now that the paint is drying on this poppy, the yellow actually stands out reasonably well on it. So if it's coming out too strong, then just put a tap of orange into your mix, and that will stop it from being too yellow. I think that's too yellow, so we'll just soften that down a bit. I want a bit more, and obviously just be aware of the fact that as you're painting, if your paint is still wet, you pick up little bits of darker paint underneath, then just be careful of that. So you can see now that it's really coming together. I'm just going to put some bits of yellow there, bit bright again, so just a bit more orange into it. It's just to give that area a little bit more colour. I'm going to put some along the top of there and there. Right, okay, so now I've got my highlights and my middle tones. I'm going to just put in a little bit of very dark paint. I'm using the phthalo blue here with a little bit of black in it, and because my black is quite thick, I'm just adding a touch of water. So phthalo blue and black. If you haven't got phthalo blue, then ultramarine is fine. In normal acrylic sets, you normally only get an ultramarine, and that's the dark blue that you would use. So again, nice fine brush, and make sure that the brush is filled up well from top to bottom with paint, and we're just going to put a little dark edge just under there to separate this petal from the one below. Same on the other side, this one here, into that corner there, and again just paint outwards if you can, up above. Like I said, if it's a bit thick, just add a bit more water. You'll find that if it's too thick, especially when you're painting fine lines, that your paint will not flow to do thin marks. So a little touch of water really does help. So in above that, where else? Here. And you can see that that definition really starts to bring out those areas of the poppy. A little bit under here, a few more lines up here, like that. There. Anywhere else? Oh yes, here. And I think I'll put just a touch under there, like that. Bit there. Okay, I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to start painting the central section. So a bit of the phthalo blue mixed with the alizarin crimson, phthalo blue mixed together. We need some of that, and then we need some of that mixed with a little bit of this pink colour, just to make a lighter tone. It's always grey, that. So in here, we're just going to put the central stamen. This is the highlighted bit of the poppy head. And if you want, you can put in a bit of yellow, just to sort of give it where the light is catching the odd stamen. And then you take that alizarin crimson phthalo blue mix, and we put some in the foreground, and we're putting the paintbrush down, flicking upwards, putting paintbrush down, flick upwards, paintbrush down, flick, paint down, flick, 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 like that. And you're doing like a curved, a sort of arch shape, because that area is a sort of ball shape. So, and we also need to put in some that are just behind the highlighted ones. So again, just work outwards like so. Now we're just going to put a touch of black into that just to darken it up even further, and we're just going to put in a few darker. I'm going to put a curve at the bottom here, and then I'm just going to put some darker, ones just in the foreground, and maybe a couple just behind like that. Okay, now just gonna finish that there like that. Okay, so the last thing to do is to just put a nice green stem in. Now, where's my green gone? Okay, so I'm using, sorry, I got my paintbrush in my mouth. I'm using sap green here, and I'm just going to use it straight out of the pot with a little bit of water. So, touch of water, and I'm just going to put a stem in. Try not to make this stem too thick. Poppies are very delicate, even though they have they do have a thickness to their stem. It's not enormous, so be careful. And often the stems tend to be a sort of browny, yellow ochre tone. So put the green in first, get that nice and thick. I mean, the paint is thick, not the stem. And then you can take a finer brush, make sure it's dry, the brush, add a little of that purple mix that you made into the same, a little bit of that phthalo blue with alizarin crimson, just add it into a little bit of the green, and that can be your shadow. So I'm going to put the shadow on the left hand side. I'm just going to, nice and fine, like so, all the way down. And then I'm going to take a little bit of that light yellow, and I'm going to add some of that into the sap green, and that'll be my highlight colour, so that will go on the other side. And if it's not strong enough, just add a little bit more yellow to that mix, like that. Okay, so I think we'll leave it at that. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe, and you'll receive updates and further information about other tutorials, and also leave comments and have a go, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay. Oh, the other thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to show you just a quick technique of how to lay down a brush of colour with two different colours on it, which would create a petal. So it's similar to these ones that I did here. So all you need to do is pick up some yellow or some orange on one side of your brush, so like this, Make sure that the paint is nice and fluid, and also that it is well mixed into your brush. So can you see that's nice and fluid? And then pick up a little bit of red on the other side of the brush, like that. Can you see? We've got orange and red on the same brush, and I'm using a square brush here. So we've got cadmium red, cadmium orange, and we're just going to, because the center of the petal is normally where the lightness comes from, we're just going to paint a petal with that. So we've got orange in the center and darker red on the outside. We put our brush down and we work in a curved shape like so. Okay, so the opposite being, if you want the orange on the outside and the darkness in the center, then put the darkness down first, the darker red down first, press your brush down and in a curve, so you're making a petal shape, and then down and round. So have a go at these, and then obviously you put multiples together in order to get some poppy shapes, but it takes a bit of practice, so have a go. You can get a couple of poppy heads out of the same brush. You can also do sort of thin petals for the sides like that. You can do smaller petals, so just like that. So just have a practice and see if that technique suits you. Okay, thanks for watching, and see you again. Bye.